that was a 50-50 call that we saw at the weekend. There was nothing 50-50 about what happened at Eden Park or, in my mind, to what happened in Wellington either. Those were egregiously wrong decisions that decided the outcome of a test match.
What I really liked is I love the innovation, because that red wall, how do you get past that red wall? You got to go through it, but they also just had clever little changes of pace.
I think World Rugby does have to come up with a judgment, and let's hope they come up with a better answer than what we got back in 2017.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
What a cracking game that was. I started the show by saying this, Tony. I thought that was a brilliant game of rugby to watch. And for all of us neutrals who didn't really have a horse in the race, I wanted Australia to win that game because I wanted to go to the decider at 1-1. We've got a lot of rugby to talk about. That obviously the Lions Wallabies second test. We've got the NPC starting on Thursday. And the Black Ferns World Cup squad was announced on Friday. We'll touch on that as well. But first and foremost, let's agree it was a brilliant game of rugby, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I guess what happened in the test match for the minutes 1 to 79's been overshadowed by what happened in minute 80, and that just seems to be the way with Lions series now. It was always going to blow up at some point, and blow up it certainly did. But before that, I thought we had an epic test match. Played in front of one of the biggest crowds, not the biggest crowd. We're told that there was 100,000 to watch a test in South Africa in I think it was the 1930s.
108,000 turned up in 2000 to watch that game of the century, us and the Wallabies.
No, they were saying it was the biggest crowd to watch a Lions test match, but I think there was one in South Africa back in the days when who would have known how many people were squeezed into the ground. But still, fantastic crowd. Great to take it to Melbourne, because it may not be a rugby city, but it's one of the sporting capitals of the world.
Agreed.
So you had that backdrop. The Wallabies getting out to a terrific start and building a lead that no Lions team has ever come from a deficit like that to win a test match before. That's the magnitude of what they did in that test match. And you unpack it and you think, well, there was a great opportunity for Australia to level the series, but in the end, they didn't take it. A lot of controversy over the final minutes.
Let's start with the final minutes then, because I've got, as far as I'm concerned, at 23-5, they needed to shut that first half down. But let's come back to that, because Phil Ward's now gone on the offensive and demanding answers from World Rugby and wants a full explanation of that decision in the end. Simple. Was it a try or was it a penalty?
Yeah, okay. First and foremost, I think World Rugby does have to come up with a judgment, and let's hope they come up with a better answer than what we got back in 2017, which was very glib, and it was never really made public, but it was like, well, they probably got the decision wrong, but hey, what a great result in the end, it was a draw sort of thing. I think they've got to come out with some definitive judgment on this. Look, You've got to break it down. When I first saw it, I thought, yep, they're in trouble here. This is going to be overturned.
But was that because of the reaction of the guy jumping out almost during the Hollywood? Because that's the first thing I saw out of the corner of my eye. I thought, wow, he's gone spinning backwards here.
Okay, I looked at that really close. I don't think it was a Hollywood. But let's go back to the beginning. Firstly, Tizzano. Has he entered the tackle situation legally? That's the first thing that they have to check off, and the answer is yes, just. He's got 1 foot kind of behind the player, one maybe alongside him, but that's legal, so he's made a legal entry. Right. Secondly, he goes in to jackal the ball. His head is below his hip line. Now, technically, you could penalise that, but no one does. It happens all the time, but that wasn't going to be a factor in it. Then it's a matter of, did they arrive simultaneously and it just became a simultaneous contact over the ball, or did one of them get there first? And I think this is where the first thing that the referee got wrong, because with the naked eye it looked like they did arrive simultaneously and it was just a collision of bodies. But you slow it down, Tizzano was definitely there first. Then Morgan comes clattering into him, and he definitely catches him around the back of the neck, but he also, I think there's a fair bit of upper back in that as well. So that's 50-50.
Okay.
And the problem with this is that if you're going to penalise that, then you've got to penalise it 10 other times in a game.
That's exactly right, yep.
And you didn't. Now, I did make a few phone calls, and I spoke. One referee said to me that he didn't think it was foul play. Okay. Although he said one of his colleagues thought it might have been. So it's
rugby,
really,
though, isn't it?
really
this
hard.
This is rugby, though. This is what rugby is these days.
But, Martin, we are looking for perfect application in a game that's imperfect by its very nature.
And it's because of the incident at that time and what it meant in the consequence of the game. If that was in the 8th minute, we probably wouldn't be talking about it at all, right?
No. And if they'd penalised it in the 8th minute, then you would justify perhaps penalising it in the 78th or 79th or whatever it was. So having initially thought that it was foul play, looked at it again, and I think the collision... It's 50-50 at most. I think it would be a really, really tough call to overturn the try on the evidence of that. But as I say, I think by focusing on the arrival time, I don't think he has sold it very well. And secondly, this suggestion that he was looking to wrap again as a kind of a sort of a softening or mitigation or a justification factor. I don't think he wrapped really until he was off his feet. And then he's grabbed Tizzano around the lower legs, the ankles, and that has had a big impact on him toppling backwards.
Okay.
And I really don't believe that it was a Hollywood. He's just not that sort of player. I've been watching the guy all year. He's been one of the best players in Super Rugby this year.
Mind you, it's creeping into the game. You see Gibson Park does it a lot, Tony. He's yapping at the ref, waving imaginary cards around. You see it a lot in rugby league now. Players are doing it as well. They all want the ref to make a call, don't they? So
yeah, but I don't think it was a Hollywood, Martin.
Okay, you don't think it was?
He's taken a blow on the back of the head or the back of the neck or whatever it was. He clutched that area. Maybe it did look a bit dramatic, but the fact that he's actually fallen over in the end, I think is much to do with the fact that the bloke's got him round.
You don't think it was exaggerated, all his actions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the initial response was certainly, wow, I've been whacked. But no, I think the falling bit, that he didn't take a dive. That's my view. I don't expect everyone to agree with that.
That's okay, but so how do we wrap this up and conclude it? Because the game is over, the try's been awarded, the series has been won.
Yeah, and I think that's basically how you conclude it. That I think to overturn in that situation would have been monumental. And look, we can't have a situation where we're saying to the TMOs and the referee, we want to keep the game sped up. We don't want these forensic examinations, blah, 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 and then turn around because it suits your argument that we want it for this bit here.
Right.
Unless you go to what American football does when the last 2 minutes of the game gets turned over to the bunker.
Yeah, that's it. And they decide everything.
And it takes forever to play the last 2 minutes of a game of football. Do we want that in rugby? In search of, as I say, you're looking for perfect answers in an imperfect situation.
Yeah.
So look, in the end, I think the decision, much as like you, I would have loved to have seen this go to a decider. I think probably in the end they got it right. And the only thing Giardi to me, Piatti to me is Giardi. That's a disease. Piatti.
You don't want that.
He's a very good ref.
Yeah, and you actually thought he refed well?
I thought he refereed the game well. The only real question mark I would have was over the scrum. And again, just from discussions that I've had, it looked a bit sus to me. I thought in the first half that Porter, the loose head, was angling in. And definite suspicion that later in the game, Genge was, on at least one occasion, of taking a scrum down and not being penalised for it. There was a situation where there was a reset and it looked to all the world like he'd taken it down. So maybe they got away with a bit at scrum time, the Lions.
Yep.
But 50-50 calls all over the place in a test match like that.
It's a bugger that this has been such a focus, given the fact that, as I said right at the beginning, it was a brilliant game of rugby. And I don't think the Wallabies lost it then anyway. I thought at 23-5 up, if I can pinpoint one moment, Tom Liner knocking the ball on. That gave the Lions 7 points, followed by 5 points, and all of a sudden 18 points at halftime became 6. And they needed to go in 10-12 up, I thought, because they deserved that with the way they played that first half. And look, we had John Eales and Nick Farr-Jones on the program, Tony, in recent weeks. Both of them said the same thing. We can't make these mistakes. We have to minimise these mistakes. And that was an absolute clanger. I'm not saying he cost them the match, but that was a huge moment in that match, wasn't it?
And that's the pressure of Test match rugby. When you play a team that's got a good kicking game, they're going to keep coming and they're going to keep coming because sooner or later someone's going to make a mistake. And it opened the door for that revival. And I totally agree that what happened in the last 10 or so minutes or whatever it was of the first half, that probably was where the test was won and lost.
Yeah.
They'd done so well to get off to a great start. Clearly, the arrival of Skelton and Valetini made a massive difference.
Yeah. But they didn't have enough. They didn't have enough in the tank to go more than 40 minutes. But those two bodies changed the way that the Australian forward pack went in that first 40 minutes, didn't it? They had momentum. They could hit the breakdown. They had ball carriers. Everything we didn't see in the first test, they had because of those two guys.
Yeah, instead of players being stopped on or behind the advantage line, or even sometimes bouncing back out of contact, they were denting the line.
Yeah.
They were getting the ball going forward. He's got such a huge frame, Skelton, and he's the kind of lock that the French love, because he's not there to jump in the line out. You'd need a crane to lift him.
He's 140 kilos or something insane.
At the very least.
Right, okay.
But he's a good lifter. He'll move bodies.
Yeah.
And when he gets the ball in hand, he will bend or dent or buckle a defence.
Yeah, he takes two or three to get.
Force of his carry.
Course, yeah.
And when you then have Valetini charging onto it, because he's terrific, phenomenal with ball in hand, and Wilson, who's not too bad at it either, suddenly it's a different game for Australia. The problem they had was that they had, once those guys went off, now clearly Skelton was struggling by half time. And so he wasn't going to last the distance, and I suppose that's the downside of a big frame like that. Is you're not going to get much more than 50 effective minutes out of him.
Pretty good minutes, though.
If you're lucky. Very good minutes. But what have you got to come on in his place? Yeah. And same with Valetini, who just hasn't been playing rugby. He was gassed as well. What have you got to come on in his place?
Same as the props, Tony. They took out Alatai and they took out
Slipper.
And the next two guys, the scrum is completely collapsed after that. So, that it's that bench for Australia, isn't it? But just on the carries as well, what I really liked is I love the innovation, because that red wall, how do you get past that red wall? You got to go through it. But they also just had clever little changes of pace. A lot of it was footwork. They just stopped before they went, just creating a different angle and just trying to get a little bit of room. I thought the rugby, and it was precise. It was fast. It was precise. That's what I loved about how Australia played.
Yeah, and decisions that Joe Schmidt made in terms of his selection of the frontline team vindicated. I think Gordon had a much better game at halfback, for example. He was probably allowed to, because he just had that little bit of extra
room and time.
Behind the ruck ball. They kicked well. It's a shame about losing Potter, but then McDermott, who I was saying last week should have been starting, comes on, had a wow of a game on the wing.
Yeah. I mean, there was one where he bounced out of a tackle early and he kept running and he made meters again. And obviously, Swahili proving that you put him one-on-one in a gap, and what an absolute beast he is as well. So
he is, but then a couple of times he just got caught flat on defence. And that is probably, that took a bit of gloss off his performance.
Let's go to the second half then, because in that half, Australia scored 3 points and they conceded 2 tries to 0. And I thought that 40 was owned pretty much by the Lions. And so, the last 20 minutes, it looked as though Aussie were just hanging on, didn't they?
Well, the difference was, and this is the power of 4 against the power of 1, a team that Australia had always managed to put quality players on the field, but what have you got in reserve? And whereas the Lions, with the power of 4 nations, can bring outstanding international players off the bench, Australia didn't quite have that luxury. I've seen a few comments about, well, if you had Tupou or Salakai-Lotu to come off the bench, they could have replaced that force with force. Look, I think Nella just made it impossible to be selected. His form just did not warrant his. It would have been a huge punt to select him. So we'll never really know that one. Salakai-Lotu, definitely. He's a guy, particularly with the way he played against them last week. Maybe he's the guy that could have kept it going. So that strong bench definitely helped the Lions. Look, the Lions, it wasn't their best performance, particularly in the first 40. They made mistakes. Their discipline, and I thought Itoje gave away some penalties there. He got picked up a few times. I didn't much like the way he raced in and got on the referee's face right at the end of the game too. But I suppose that's by the by. Lowe didn't have a great game at all on the wing.
He did one amazing thing.
Except for that, which was set up a try.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
That's James Lowe. Yeah. And again, the Lions' loose forwards were phenomenal. Curry was outstanding. Tyke Burns to me, he's been their best player this whole series. So I think they just had that extra power off the bench, extra strength off the bench, and they got their game together in the second half. And
any test you can come back from 23-5, and I remember, God, I think that scoreline it was 1990. and we went to South Africa and we lost in Durban. I think we were up 23-5. And I don't know why that sticks in my mind, that game, and we lost that game as well.
Yep.
The All Blacks lost 24-23.
I know the one when
try dropped over the line.
James Dalton basketball dribbled the ball over the line.
You remember it as well, okay?
Peter Marshall, I remember the ref.
I remember that as well. Look, I think Australia can be really encouraged after that. It is a bummer for us that we're not going into Sydney and it's 1-1, because what an absolute blockbuster of an encounter that would be. The Lions are still going to want to win this game because they can become the only team on tour, I think, that's won every single game. So they've still got plenty to play for. But when you look at them and you break it down, and I made a couple of notes here, the rush defence, the suffocating, on that gain line where they just commit so many bodies to it, right, which means that there has to be gaps elsewhere. You've got to think. The box kicks, the relentless crash and bash inside your 22. These are all things that if you're Scott Robertson, you're looking at, how do I devise a game plan around that? The All Blacks, if the All Blacks are on the field, can we counter that? Can you actually imagine the All Blacks playing up against that red wave and actually thinking, okay, we've got ways and players to get around this?
Well, I think the Australians showed in the first half that there are ways around it, particularly if you can put enough pressure on them to force them into making mistakes. It was just a much better performance. I think still in the final analysis, it is that defence that's been the winner for the Lions. I think they've showed plenty of good attacking intent throughout the series. And in test matches, you do have to go to those high kicks. That's how test matches can be won and lost. But they were able to raise it a gear with the game on the line. And for all the talk about what went on at that tackle, that was still a terrific passage of play that led to that match-winning try.
They didn't concede a try in the second half either. Okay, so that says an awful lot in a game of rugby, doesn't it?
But look, bottom line, much, much better performance from the Wallabies. If they'd played like that in the first test, who knows? But the first test was a bit of a meek effort by comparison, and I said it at the time, to me that was probably curtains as far as the series were concerned. I couldn't see the Wallabies coming back. They very nearly did, proved us wrong, and the result was a fantastic test match. And as a neutral, and we get the
benefit of just being able to sit here and enjoy this
and enjoy it without having skin in it, other than wanting it to go to a decider.
Well, Tony, if this was the All Blacks and we'd lost a test to the Lions, we'd be like the Australians at the moment. We'd be outraged at that final decision. We'd micro-analysing it forever.
Well, you go back to 2017 and
that penalty was awarded for us to start with, wasn't it?
Picking up on my earlier comments, I think this was, that was a 50-50 call that we saw at the weekend. There was nothing 50-50 about what happened at Eden Park or, in my mind, to what happened in Wellington either. Those were egregiously wrong decisions that decided the outcome of a test match. This was a different category, but it's provided so much fallout in the aftermath. The only thing is that a lot of the format is tainted by nationalism, parochialism, passion for your own country. Call it what you will, whereas we can sit back, I hope, and make a more dispassionate
game of rugby. But I mean, back to my thing. Are you looking at the All Blacks and like I think every All Black fan is looking at it going, okay, could we beat this team hypothetically if we played them? And I asked you that question hypothetically last week.
Well, hypothetically, we won't have to play them. Well, no, that's definitely because it's not on the cards. They'll be more worried about or more concerned or more taken up with how they're going to beat the Springboks. And an Australian team that showed signs that if they can keep that formula together, by the time they get the Bledisloe Cup, they might be pretty hard to beat. Because they take on the South Africans first. So that's going to be fascinating. That's going to give us a really good idea of what they're up against for those test matches. The All Blacks obviously initially have to go to Argentina.
And that squad is announced next Monday.
4th.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be looking forward to that, and we'll obviously be covering that on the podcast then. Yeah. So we've got this to look forward to: Aussie up against South Africa, and a renewed Australian side, because you've got to say that after that first half performance. And then, of course, we go to Argentina, 2 tough matches, and then us against the Springboks.
Does also beg the question too, Martin, that I said last week, that I felt that maybe Australia had suffered a bit from being underdone. That match against Fiji...
Not enough in terms of prep.
Not enough in terms... That another game would have been really, really helpful, whereas the Lions had been building momentum through the tour. It didn't matter how strong or weak the opposition was. It was that playing time together, when you're moulding together the elements of, 3 and a little bit international teams. Although that one Welsh
guy had a massive influence on the game at the end, didn't it?
Yeah. So it sometimes can be the way too. So I think that hasn't helped Australia. Maybe there's a couple of selection issues there that hasn't helped them either, but I just think that time together, and Andy Farrell's a terrific coach. And I love the way he just sits there. He's very calm in the box, doesn't show a lot of emotion, but you can tell the mind's ticking over. To me, he's the perfect guy, and he doesn't get involved in all that nasty stuff that has, to me, tainted the recent Lions tours, and it has involved the coaches. So some kudos to Andy Farrell as well, because he has now coached the Lions team to a series win in Australia.
All right, we've got our NPC kicking off on Thursday. The Not Fit for Purpose competition is back, and it was fit for purpose last year. Wellington won, of course. In case you don't know or don't remember, Taranaki hold the shield after Tasman took it off Hawke's Bay and had a couple of defences there. I think their second defence they might have lost it. They defended it once, I think, and then this again is going to come at us real fast. A whole lot of games happen before you realise. We've played 4 games already. I only saw 2 of them or something. So we won't go through every single team, but obviously you're going to be involved in this, calling a lot of these games, Tone. So again, it's an opportunity for us to see another layer of players in New Zealand rugby. It brings out all the best aspects, I think, of the provincial thing that we've all loved as us old guys grew up with, hating Canterbury and Waikato and Auckland and everything else, being from Wellington. You, of course, being a Marlborough man, joined forces, and now you've got this juggernaut called Tasman, which has taken on its own life.
Well, it may not be fit for purpose, but I love it.
Well, rugby fans do in this country, Tony. Well, us old guys love it.
Yeah, and don't judge it on swathes of empty seating at Eden Park, because to me what it's become about, it's what you see at Tauranga, where
they do it well
Bay of
down there,
Plenty have developed such a great connection with their community. Those matches at the Tauranga Domain are a community event. They get great turnouts there. Judge it on the success of Canterbury, again taking a game to Rangiora, which has been a wonderful development there. It's Stag Day in Invercargill for the Otago
Southland
game.
What does that even mean, Tony? What is that?
Well, you'll see when you look at the crowd, you'll see what it means. There's a hell of a lot of fun to be had there. Northland, the connections, the incredible work that they're doing in the community there. Yep. You mentioned Tasman, the galvanising effect that the Ranfurly Shield win had. It was only brief. It was a short time, not a long time, but it was a great time. Yep. Taranaki, again, another union. That, to me, the provincial unions, the day in the sun that they get out of it. So I'm really looking forward to it. 2 things. Firstly, we'll see a layer of players coming out of the age group ranks into NPC rugby, quite a few from our under-20 side scattered around the country. That's always good to look for. You get some seasoned veterans coming back in particular, Lester Whainga Anuku playing for Tasman.
Yeah, John Day did a great interview on this channel on Friday with him as well, if you want to have a look at it.
Well, it was really interesting, the fact that he's actually been playing in the loose forwards a bit in France. Yeah. I see him as potentially centre for the All Blacks. That might be where they're looking at. I know he's played in the wing in the past, but if he's been playing a lot of his rugby at centre, but also with that ability to play in the loose forwards, that opens up possibilities. I'm not saying he's going to come in and take the place of Billy Proctor or Rico Ioane, but I think they'll be looking very closely with a view to getting him back into the All Blacks. If not for the Rugby Championship, then definitely for the end of the year.
Let's not forget, Tony, he was in Paris in 2023 for the Rugby World Cup, right? And he came in for Sever, I think, at one stage on the wing there, and he played
really well. Yeah. If his form warrants it, of course, but there are also guys who have been left out of the All Black setup who'll be fighting to get their way back in, and mentioning Tasman, I mean, David Havili, Ethan Blackadder are a couple of names there, but they're scattered around the country as well. It starts Thursday night, Auckland against Waikato, which is a traditional game, and I like the way they've got a few of these going in the first week. You've got Wellington against Canterbury, Stag Day, as I've mentioned, Otago, Southland, playing on those rivalries that go back over a century. Manawatu, Ngani Laumapi back in their ranks this year. North Harbour, they picked up a couple of very good players from Moana Pacifica. They don't have Tane Edmed this year, but they've got Patrick Pellegrini and Tom Savage from Moana. So there's a bit of a connection going there, obviously, with the North Harbour Stadium thing. Bay of Plenty against Tasman. Bay of Plenty, of course, heartbreakingly losing the final to Wellington last year. Tasman, we've mentioned, with the strength of players that they've inherited, that's going to make them tough to beat, certainly in the early stages. Wellington, Canterbury, Wellington, the defending champions. Then you've got Stag Day, you've got...
Don't forget also the Shield game this Saturday night, and that's their third defence this year. They've played King Country and Thames Valley, taken it away, and then they get Northland at home.
Yeah, which is always a great thing to do,
yeah.
to take the Shield on the road against a couple of heartland teams. What it does is it gives them a bit of a lead in that some of the teams haven't got. There's been a paucity of pre-season games. There's been a few clashes around the country with the clubs protesting about the fact that pre-season for the NPC, or even that is coinciding with the climax of the club seasons as well. And so some of the teams have had to step back and not have much in the way of pre-season work or pre-season games. So some of them are going a little bit cold. So, Taranaki at home to Northland, who've picked up a couple of good signings out of the Blues ranks, which will help them, I'm sure. And the other game, Hawke's Bay against Counties Manukau. Hawke's Bay, Zahn Sullivan has gone to join them. Counties Manukau, that team that no one can ever take lightly as well. So that's the lineup for the first weekend. And really looking forward to it. I got the game at Eden Park on Thursday. So who knows what's going to unfold this year.
Let's kick it with the Black Ferns squad, which was announced on Friday for the World Cup, 33 players. There are some, of course, there's always disappointments, those who miss out, and some decisions have been made, some quite pragmatic decisions have been made, haven't they?
Oh, for sure. What I like about this team, two things. Firstly, there's been this injection this year of a couple of startling young talents to the side. Gives them a bit of a point of difference on last year where things were pretty disappointing. But you bring Braxton Sorensen-McGee and Georgia Miller into the side, and you bring some young X-Factor. Sorensen-McGee, obviously one of the stars of Opiki this year, and Georgia Miller, who has made a phenomenal transition and is doing the things in 15s that she was doing in 7s, plus all the core things that's required. It's going to be very interesting to see how they use her. Perhaps they'll use the likes of Kaipo Olsen-Baker and co, strong ball-carrying players to dent the defence early on. If you bring Miller off the bench with her incredible evasive abilities, that brings another layer of play, if you like, to the Black Ferns. I particularly like the way some players who were left out of the team earlier on or last year have fought their way back into the side. That really augurs well. That means they've shown a lot of determination, a lot of commitment, whether it's to improve their form or conditioning or whatever it was. That they have worked on it and they've earned their way back in. I suppose one of the talking points has been that Ruby Tui wasn't selected, and she is such a popular figure with the public. But the way
that's one of the pragmatic decisions I think has been made.
And who would you leave out to put her in? You've got explosive talent.
Been a close call
in that backfield contingent, the wingers, and so to me it was just a matter of who would you have left out for her? She's done a fantastic thing for New Zealand women's rugby, for New Zealand rugby in general. But I guess in the end, it was a situation where he just had a bit too much talent to fit into the team.
And in the end, Aussie, it was a try.
DSPN.